This is my sister Edith, the biggest personality. She walked into a room, everybody just stopped, and not because of her beauty, it's because of her personality. And some of the quick stories is that in the 40s, she was single, and when you were single in the 40s, you lived home. You didn't go to New York and become a career girl. You lived home. You left when you got married. That was it. There was no ifs or buts. So she lived with me. I was going to high school, and she's a single woman, and she wanted. She was ready to get married, and she went to this famous resort in New Hampshire, where people went for years, and it didn't close till the internet got all these matchmaking societies like J-Date. But before all that, and before women left the house and went to bars to pick up people, you had to go to a singles weekend at Concord or Grossinger's, or in the summer, you went to Lake Tarleton in New Hampshire. It's like a 10-hour trip. And people, the women and the men, we didn't all have cars. Women, especially women, would hire a taxi and after they send their luggage up to the hotel, they would then chip in and go with like 4 girls in a cab, because a 10-hour ride. And it only took people from Sunday to Sunday. It was no weekends. And it had 400 people, 200 women, 200 men, exactly. Because if you called up and you were a male and they already had 200, you'd have to go the next week. They just wouldn't take you. So when you went up there, they had a maitre d' who would look you over when you came in the first night on Sunday, and he put the personality at one table and the ugly ducklings at another. I mean, he really knew after many years where to sit everybody. And half the people up there got married after they met someone. And my sister Edith met Jack, and she was crazy in love with him. When she came back and lived home, after she came back that week, she'd drive my father crazy. And she was, anyway, the long story short, she got married to Jack, and they met at the Taunton. Now, I've been up there 10 years after that, and it's true. I mean, when you on Sunday night afternoon, when you leave and the new group comes in, if the women weren't asked for their phone number by the men in the lobby ready to go back to New York, it was a waste of money. I mean, it was a disaster. But that was the Taunton. That was before the internet. Now, the reason I want to stress about my sister being so unusual, she had 3 children, but one at a time, of course, not like I did. And after she had Jill was like a 1-year-old, maybe 6 months old, usually baby. My father had a heart attack. And the relationship between my sister and father has never been duplicated in any family. It was an unbelievable love. And my sister took this little baby, Jill, into Brooklyn every morning. Jack would drive her in, and she would stay with my father recuperating from the heart attack. And I am convinced that he lived 5 years more than he did after a massive heart attack because of her. Every day for 3 years, she was at my house. And Jack would take her home at 5 o'clock when he came back from work. And it was the greatest relationship of a daughter-father I have ever seen. And she was the greatest personality. Oh, I skipped a part that before she met Jack, we used to go up to the Catskills, and she was, not married, and I was a young kid, like 10 or 7. And we wouldn't go up for a week in the Catskills like all my friends and everybody did in New York. We would go up for the whole summer. Edith, me, and my mother. And my father would come up only on weekends. And because we were there all summer at the famous Browns Hotel, which is like the 3rd largest, Grossinger's, Concord, and the Browns Hotel, we would take over the hotel, meaning my mother was behind the reception desk, and every weekend Edith would go with the Tumbler. Tumbler is the entertainer that was there all week, and she would put on performances with the comics on Saturday night in the casino on the stage. She was the greatest personality I've ever seen. And that's how we lived the summers until she got married, and that all ended. And in fact, the owners of the Browns Hotel, Charles and Lillian Brown, were very friendly with my family. They attended my brother's wedding in about 1950, I think it was, around that time. So that love affair of my sister and my father is something I will never forget. All right, and I got to add about the Browns Hotel. In the mid-'60s, like 5 years before my wedding, my nephew Alan married Buddy, went up to the Browns Hotel, and they really were treated nice. The Lillian and Charlie Brown, the owners that went to my brother Fred's wedding, made sure that they had extra chopped liver at every dinner. The only thing is, Alan and Buddy never came down for dinner that whole week. No one ever saw them except at breakfast. And now let me diverse a little bit to another part of the family which I didn't show, is my nephew Gary from my brother Fred, and a story about his sister Judy. And he also has another brother named Richard. And here's the story of what happened. Gary and Richard both became engineers from good schools. In fact, Richard went to the same college I did, and they both got master's degrees. And they're really, really very successful. And their little sister, Judy, went to some nondescript school in upstate New York, a college, which was a really a playboy college. And she took wild conservation of parks degree, or park ranger, some kind of stupid degree. And she came out of college with this nothing, worthless degree, and her two brothers are working in industry with their two master's degrees in engineering. And one day, after she's about less than a year out of college, she actually found, and this is true family story, she found a match pack. And in it, when she was using it, it had an ad for Chubb Insurance Company giving a 9-month course in computer programming and technology, which in the 70s was really an unknown thing. I mean, she took a course in computers. They weren't even teaching it in college. And after the 9 months, she got out and became a programmer. And within a year, she made more money than either one of her brothers. And that's what we're talking about 30 years ago, and maybe 35 years ago. And she's still a programmer, working for big companies. And she now works out of the Salt Lake City house they just bought with her husband, who's also a programmer. And they work out of their house full-time for companies that are thousands of miles away. And she is really the best educated matchbook graduate in America. Well, this is a story about American opportunity and Americans' wonderful chance it gives to people who are immigrants. 127 years ago, my grandparents, Haskell and Tina, came over in 1900, and this is 2017, so that way that's 117 years. And in that time, you have to realize they couldn't speak a word of English. They spoke Yiddish, but they were educated in their own native countries of Austria, Prussia, but they were nothing in English when they came here in the very first year of the 20th century. And they had, we went over how many children they had, and then they're on and on and on. And anyway, my generation, I'm a grandson. And so in that generation of mine, there's only two of us, of grandchildren, of their grandchildren that went to college. My brother, Fred, went to Miami of Ohio and graduated in the late 30s, like 1938. And I went to Stevens Institute of Technology, which is here. And that's the only two grandchildren of the people who came here in 1900. But their great-grandchildren, meaning my generation's children, all went to college. And this is to show you some of the colleges, or I hope all the colleges they attended. I ran out of ink on this one. It's supposed to say Charleston College, where Pamela's two sons, Pamela and Pete's two sons, went to college. But let me just go over it quickly. The University of Penn, my sister Edith's daughter, Joy, went there. I said Freddie went here. Stevens Institute, I am a graduate there, and my nephew, my brother Fred's son, Richard, attended Stevens as a graduate there and has a master's degree out of Stevens. The University of Buffalo is his brother. That's Fred's older son, Gary. No, he's the youngest son. And they also had, Fred had a daughter, went to Brockport. And the Ramapo College, my nephew Alan, his son, his grandson went there and met his wife there. The two of them went to Ramapo. Alfred College, which is a school that I discovered when I worked up in upstate New York when I got out of my college. And it's this very small school, and it really is a Schnabolk school. Alan's daughter, Pamela, went there and met her husband, Pete. Pamela was the queen at the end of the year. What do you call it? The campus queen, and he was the campus king. Or it might have been vice versa. But both of them went there, and they went there with my really favorite nephew, Howard John Schnabolk, who passed away and got killed in Vietnam. So we had 3 in Alfred, and they started a scholarship there in honor of my nephew, Howard. Bates College, my nephew, Eric, no, that's my son. My nephew, Mark, went there, and I have a little story about him, I'm going to tell you later, or I already told you. Ithaca College, my son went there, Alan, son went there, and for for 2 years, Jill, my sister's daughter, went there. So there's a lot of loyalty to Ithaca College, especially since I used to go up there all the time and visit Alfred, and at the same time I used to visit Cornell, because they're both in the same town on different sides of the hill, and I used to fly my small plane up there and take my son Eric to lunch and my daughter Andra to dinner. But anyway, let's not jump. Brooklyn College, my ex-wife Madeline went there, and I went there for 1 term before I went to Stevens. NYU, I have a graduate degree there, and Jill went there after she transferred from Ithaca, and her husband Andrew went there also. They knew each other before, I think. The University of Hartford, my nephew Jay, Dr. Jay. Montclair College, Alan's daughter, I think Pamela went there. Lehigh College is 3. That's a favorite college of the family. My son Brian went there, and and Alan's son Stuart, and he met his wife there, and they're married, have a little baby, and they went to Lehigh. Villanova is the Lambs. Meredith's husband, and Meredith is Alan's daughter. Her husband Greg went there. Cornell, I mentioned that my daughter went there, but I put 2 because my daughter-in-law went there also. I have 2 relatives, close relatives, went there. Penn State is my daughter, married, a graduate of Penn State. And Columbia, Alan's son, Howard, went there, but he didn't go to the campus in New York. He went to the campus in Tucson, which is a bubble, and he lived in the bubble for a year for his master's degree on environmental. It has foliage inside. It was pretty famous. It's a bubble. You close it, and the air circulates from the vegetables, and you eat. I mean, somehow you live there for a whole year. And he's an environmentalist because of that experience and that degree. And the degree is from Columbia. University of Maryland is Jill, my niece, my sister's daughter. So he's my niece's son went there, and then he got a law degree out of Hofstra. Rutgers is my daughter-in-law, and Brian's wife got there. She has a degree in human studies. University of Michigan is Jill's daughter went there. Emery, her other daughter, went there. And Humboldt College is where Howard went for undergraduate before he went to Columbia. Drexel, my nephew Alan went there and commuted too often because he was courting Buddy at that time, and he let his studies go because he was always coming up to Monmouth County, but he got a degree out of Drexel. Hofstra, I told you, the law degree of Jill's son. And this is Charleston College. Pamela from Alfred, her 2 sons are either just graduated or about to graduate from Charleston. So I mean, it's got Ivy League, and it's really it's an American dream, and I think this is what this projects, and I'm very proud of all of them.
He was what? It was Jill, the boy, and the girl?
Yeah.
Jill, the boy. And I was Butch. He didn't even know my name. The day he died, he didn't know my name.
This is 3 people who are very important in my life. They are my nephews. You see over there on the first one is my nephew Jay. That's my sister Edith's only son, and she had 2 daughters. And then in the middle is Mark, who is my brother Harold's son, and so is Alan, who's the oldest of all my nephews and nieces. And they really are unusual people because their parents were unusual parents. For instance, Jay, when he was 2 years old, my sister Edith, who was a dynamite, would introduce him always without joking, "This is my son, the doctor." And right from that day on, even though he wasn't toilet trained till he was about 12 or 13, he was just about got through school. She made him a doctor, and he is really one of the most well-known doctors in Brooklyn today. And the only thing is, with all her upbringing and forcing him and guiding him, and he became really spectacular personality. And I knew all his girlfriends, but he didn't marry any of them, and I thought they all were great. And he's a bachelor. And the only thing I can say that my sister might have gone too far, she named him J. Elliott, middle name, and the last name is Weisbluth. That's my brother-in-law's name, my sister's married name. And that was a great name. It sounded manly, except when he was about 4 or 5 with this great name, she got him all dressed up in his Cub Scout uniform. And in order to get him all ready, she bought him a belt buckle. And that's the first time in his 5 years in America with J. Elliott Weisbluth became known as the Cub Scout Jew. And here's why. That's the initials. Yeah, I just want to add a few more items about Jay. Remember, he was, my sister lived in Woodmere, and I used to visit them all the time. In fact, my ex-wife reminded me that Jay came over to our house in Hoboken and helped knock down the walls. I didn't remember that. But there's that wasn't important. I think 2 things I forgot to mention is that when he was a teenager, his father, my brother-in-law, Jack, or my sister's husband, and I were partners in a boat we kept out in East Rockaway near their home. And it was a 27-foot cruiser, slept 4 with a bathroom. You know, it was a pretty nice boat. And we always had to wash it down, and we had company all the time. And Jay, being a teenager, he was our washer, dishwasher, cook, slave. He was like the deckhand for the boat, and he never forgave me for that. And I think we used to give him a ride once in a while. But that's not the important thing I want to tell you about him. In his habits now, he's a collector. He collects Corvettes. And he has a house beside living in Manhattan, and he owns the medical center in Brooklyn where he has other doctors renting space from him. He has a house in West Hampton. And what he does with his Corvettes, he expanded his garage. He made it wider, and he still couldn't get enough cars in. So he made it wider and with lifts in it. And here's a picture of the lifts. And he said he's going to make it even bigger. And I forgot to mention that he has a garage car mechanic who works on the cars, and you know she's wearing gloves. She also has other chores like helping him clean the tubes that he uses in his medical profession as a urologist, and this is what the sign he has on his plates on his car. As far as my other nephew, Mark, he had a different kind of a thing. His mother, Hilda, who was my closest relative, even though she wasn't a blood relative, he went to Bates College as a scholar. He was really, really a scholar. And she gave me his transcript, which I kept till today. I still have it somewhere. And in first year at Bates, he got all A's, A courses, all A's, which we all expected. And then he got active into the college and joined some of the activities. And the second year, I got it on the transcript, all B's. Then he joined the fraternity and really learned about drinking and womanizing and getting all D's. And then he graduated about the bottom of his class with a transcript of A, B, C, and D's. The most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. But he became a great personality, and he is now a really promoter of software companies trying to sell their software to become another Google. And he gets all the front money from it. If he's an officer, if they go public, he becomes really rich. And in 1968, he had one company from France that was going public. And in those days, any company with the word digital in the transcript, in the opening, when it went public, everybody bought it. That was it. It went crazy. And he gave me 800 shares because I'm a relative, and I was allowed to have it. He had about, millions of shares as a principal, but he couldn't sell it for a year. So it opened up at 16. I still remember the whole detail. And of the 800, I kept 400. I gave Brian and my other son, Eric, each got 200 shares, and I kept 400. And it opened up at 16 at 11 o'clock in the morning. And by another half hour, it went up to 42. And I sold it. And I made $8,000 in 15 minutes. But I never put up any money because you got 24 hours to give the money after you buy a stock. And my sons had kept it for a week, and they made about $3,000 apiece. But the point of the whole story, that this what a great nephew giving me all that money. He called me up from Seattle, where the company was when it went public, and the opening bell, and they sort of go up to 45 from nothing, and he was at that minute when he called me a $14 million man. His stock was worth $14 million, which he went out immediately and bought 22 timeshares in Aruba. He bought a new Mercedes-Benz, put an extension on his house, and the ending of the story is a year went by when he was allowed to sell it. By that time, the company had gone bankrupt, and he had to sell all his timeshares. Great nephew story. And there's my oldest nephew, Alan, who is, give you an idea how old he is. When I was 9 years old, he used to wander into my gang playing basketball or something and call me Uncle Charlie, which I still remember, they all thought that was the strangest thing they've ever seen. I mean, an 8 or 9 year old kid getting called Uncle Charlie. But he is quite a nephew. At the age of 12, he was the youngest person in the state of New Jersey ever to get a ham amateur radio license, which he was pretty much familiar with. And they had an antenna in the backyard because his father, Harold, was also a ham operator and an electrical kind of genius. And he was on the amateur radio for years. He still goes on the air till this day. And the other thing he also did is he was a speedboat. My brother encouraged him to ride speedboats and go around circles in races and flip. And I saw some of the greatest accidents I've ever seen. And he walked away from all of them. And what carried on in his family is his son Howard, one of 3 children. He is currently, this year, 2017, the nation's fastest speedboat rider on the cover of many magazines. And Howard lives in Charleston, North Carolina, and the boat, the big, huge boat, is kept in Monmouth County in the backyard of Alan's house, and Alan schleps that boat all over the country. I mean, Detroit, down to Miami, and they enter races, and Howard drives up or flies up and runs and races into it. And this is a picture of the marriage, the only picture I got of them. This is Alan's family, recently taken this year, probably 2017. But actually, what you didn't know is that the Schnabolk DNA, and you can see it prominently in this group, were actually entertainers that were pretty famous. They formed a cousin band about 25, 30 years ago that actually became very, very famous. It was on all David Letterman and all the TV shows. And here's a little scene that is the only tape left because somebody stole all the tapes because they were getting too famous. And here are these people you're looking at now when they were in a band. We're going to interview the cousins. We're going to interview Alan, Mark, and Jay about the old days and what they remember the family. And remember, they're only the 3rd generation. And here's the 3, your cousins. Yeah, I'm going to get behind you. This is Alan, my oldest nephew, Mark, his brother, and Jay. Jay is from my sister Edith, and these 2 are from my brother Harold. And we're going to reminisce a little bit if they remember their grandfather, who was my father, Sam.
It was the biggest house I ever saw. We went there every week.
Every Sunday, right? Every Sunday.
And also,
and Grandpa liked you better than me.
This is the house they're talking about in Brooklyn, where the family came over every weekend, and my mother would cook, and the kids would play in the yard. And this is the house we bought in 1942, and they were going to build right up to it, and then my father bought the lot. Hello, hi. This is the house I lived on 60 years ago, and I want you to come in here. You can stay there. I'm going to go up on the porch. This is 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and well to the 70s. And I want to show you the backyard. Come on in here. Come follow me around. And this is the backyard. And this is the same yard that Jill used to play in when she came over the house every day for 3 years. She stayed in the house, and there she is, always playing and showing off. And this was taken many years ago. And she's still an actress doing her little curtsy. Well, you'll see in a second. And I'm not sure who that is. Okay, Jill, do a little curtsy like the little actress that you were. There you are. And then she goes in the house and she's still performing. Always, even today, even though she's now a mother and almost a mother-in-law, she's still there. And there she is playing in sand, which she still does. And this is a habit that she started when she was a little young. And I think she stopped, but she still smokes. And this is a problem because when she went for auditions, she used to be seduced on the director's couch. Right? Is that true? Thank you. Now you're telling the truth. Oh, this is the film I took myself in about 1950 or 49, 50, where both my brothers were married. My sister was living home with me. She wasn't yet married. And this is in the backyard of the Brooklyn house. Like I said, 1950. That's before sound cameras. I had a handheld camera like everybody had, but it didn't have sound. So what I did is I wrote words to introduce questions for my two brothers and sister, my family, my siblings, to answer, and also my two sister-in-laws. I didn't have a brother-in-law yet because Jack didn't marry Edith till about a year or two after this. But anyway, I want to show you my family in 1940. This is my immediate family. And now, Sam and Rose, wonderful children. You notice I had to write it on the wall because remember, there was no sound in those days. The oldest is my brother, Fred. Yeah, how you doing, Fred? And he's answering the question. Remember, my family are all actors, and I'm looking at the screen as I'm talking. Fred, is your wife good to you? Well, she's terrible, terrible. He's only kidding. Of course, about 15 years later, he got a divorce. Are you good to your wife? I think he was. He's telling the truth. Yes, he said. I mean, there's a great actor. He overacts, by the way. I think I'm going to cut this out by now. Would you marry Blossom again? Oh, that's what she married her for money. He's ad-libbing a little. Oh, she had money. No. Oh, no, he made a mistake. She didn't have any money. Oh, don't remind me. Would you get married if you knew what you know now? All right, that's enough. I don't want to hear anymore. That's enough for Fred. Oh, wait a minute. That's his oldest one, Gary, at the age 4. Second is my brother Harold. Second oldest. He's been even married about 10 years. He got married in 1937. He was 38, and this is now in 1948, 49. Tell the truth. Are you fat? And he's also another actor. Now wait, I'm not sure who's that in the background, but he's saying no. Do you think your two boys are good children? He had only 2 children at that time. They were about 10 and 8. I'm not sure what that means. Have you ever looked at another woman since your marriage? And all right, that's good acting too. Is it a happy one? Is your marriage a happy one? Which child is the most intelligent? I got to add that. That's on the right is Howard. That was Alan. Is Hill? No. Oh, but she's nearby, so she saw that. That's why she's grouchy. All right, that was his sense of humor. Now this is the prettiest girl I've ever met. This is my sister Edith, who was a born actress, and when she walked into a room, everybody knew her within 10 minutes. Now, would you mind answering some questions for Dr. Kinsey? No one here watching this knows Dr. Kinsey. He wrote the first book on sex in America, and that was 1950. Is Jack? Oh, she was already married. I don't have him in the picture though. Oh, so this is. I guess she got married in 1950. Oh, she's overacting again. I didn't know she was married. Was Jack drunk when you proposed to him? Yes. All right, I believe her. How did Jack treat you before marriage? Oh, don't remind me. Oh. How many men have you tried to make love with? Or had you made love with? Oh, no, 2, 3, 4. No, wait a minute. That's not true. I'm taking that out. Now, this is just one little scene with me. I was, I guess, 19, 18. And those are my nephews making love to me. For my 3 in-laws, my 2 sister-in-laws. First is Hilda. Wait a minute. I don't remember this. But I'll leave it on. Whoops. It was the wrong Hilda. I got mixed up. This is the real Hilda, who was an expert horseman. And she was probably, it's hard to explain it, but she was my closest relative without my DNA. Are you happy you're a Schnabolk, Hilda? Yes. And that's her father-in-law, my father. Are you sure you're happy being a Schnabolk? Oy, very gewollt. Are you always dressed so expensively? I had a shade of letters. I ran out of letters. Oh, it's a habit. Yeah. She isn't a great actress. Do your children give you pleasure? Not a bit. Not a bit, she says. Are you going to have more children? Monsters, I threw that in. No. He's going to have them. He's going to have the children. Now I want to introduce my newest sister-in-law, Blossom. They were already married about 5 or 6 years when this was taken. Is your husband good to you? He beats me. Oh, she's getting into the acting field. Yeah, so she knows how to act. Are you good to your husband, Fred? Oh, you betcha. Blossom, are you going to have more children? How many? Oh, that's a lot. She only had 3. 1 of each sex, by the way. No, I'm only kidding. 2 boys and a girl. Because, why? I didn't read that in time. Hey, how come Gary looks like the milkman? She never answered that question. It's still a mystery in the family.